Hello, it's me, Adam Pachisi. As you may have heard, WWE 2K20 was released yesterday. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons that I won't get into right now, it hasn't made our top 10 wrestling video games ever list. However, to spice things up, and because they are the video game experts, aka dorks, we handed this one over to our good friends Ben and Peter from our sister channel, TripleJump. Go and give them a subscribe. There is a link in the pinned comment below. You will not regret it. Over to you, Ben and Peter.
Thanks, Adam. We're always told by wrestling companies, don't try this at home, which is wise, but also a bit unfair. I mean, Mick Foley made his name by jumping off his house, didn't he? So why can't I? Luckily for us, video games exist. A portal to different worlds. They allow us to do anything we want, whether it be stamping on turtles as an Italian plumber, or lacing up a pair of boots and doing a big grapple in the squared circle without risk of injury to our weak bodies.
Everyone has their favourites, whether it's the classic LJN games of the Hulkamania and New Generation eras, the N64 classics, the SmackDown series, 2K hits, even the half-assed ECW games. There's something for everyone. Sometimes, though, it gets a bit, weird. For every SmackDown vs. Raw, you have a WWE Crush Hour. For every WWF Attitude, you have a WCW Backstage Assault. And let's not even mention WWF Royal Rumble for the Dreamcast. Ugh.
Some wrestling games, though, just get it all right. A perfect blend of replayability, varied gameplay, and great graphics. These are the games that enthralled audiences when they were first released. I'm Ben.
And I'm Peter from TripleJump. And these are the 10 best wrestling video games ever.
Join us. Number 10. SmackDown vs. Raw 2007. The SmackDown vs. Raw series existed in the mysterious wrestling game's Middle Ages between classic blocky brawlers and the slick 2K titles of today. It was the next step in the evolution of the prior SmackDown titles, and by including the in-house feud with Raw, it proved that great competition breeded excellence in the ring. Or, outside the ring, especially when said competition hurls you into the crowd, steals a fan's sign, and says something rude about your mum before strangling you with stray cabling and smashing you through the Spanish announce table. Poor guys, that's what you get for shopping at IKEA. Crowd brawls were just one of many features that made SVR 2007 a highlight of the series. Grapple controls were switched to the right stick, which split opinion at the time, but also meant a smoother, more natural flow between moves. And besides, you wouldn't catch technicians like Bret Hart or Daniel Bryan clumsily smashing those face buttons because they don't play video games. The simulation-style General Manager mode was vastly improved, and the Incredible Season mode offered a staggering variety of branching storylines ranging from the brutal to the ludicrous. Where else will you see Candice Michelle turn your wrestler into a woman using actual witchcraft? Not on SmackDown vs. Raw 2008, that's for damn sure.
Number 9. TNA Impact. This will be the divisive entry. There's one in every list. Sometimes we just throw them in on purpose to watch you all batter each other around in the comments section, like a Roman emperor watching his subjects fight lions in the Colosseum, or like wrestling, I guess. TNA Impact came out in 2008 when TNA itself was at its creative peak. It boasted a roster featuring Kurt Angle, AJ Styles, and Shark Boy, amongst others, and featured arcade-like gameplay, which had become rare thanks to the SmackDown vs. Raw series becoming a more in-depth simulation rather than a classic brawler. Made by former Mortal Kombat head honchos Midway, Impact firmly had its roots in the beat-em-up genre, for better and for worse. Yeah, you could plod around as Scott Steiner and throw massive ham-fisted clotheslines at everyone, but Impact really came alive when playing as the X Division, especially in the Ultimate X game type. A bit like real TNA, to be honest. Yes, Impact was clunky at times, and the amount of moves wasn't exactly stellar, but the gameplay was fun and easy, and was a nice throwback to what wrestling games had once been, and for some people, how they should always be. It was meant as a first in the series and was primed to expand and grow, but Midway went out of business a year after Impact was released, and the chances of a sequel, unfortunately, went up in smoke.
Number 8. WWE Day of Reckoning 2. Oh, the GameCube, that lovely little console with the tiny discs and the weird controller and the handle for some reason, you know, from the memes. While it may have been mercilessly bullied by cool kids PlayStation 2 and Xbox, it did have Mario Kart Double Dash and quietly had two of the greatest WWE games of all time in Day of Reckoning 1 and 2. So take that, Sony and or Microsoft. It's hard to quite put your finger on what it is that makes the Day of Reckoning games so good. They just work, for want of a better phrase. In terms of features, Days of Reckoning 2 utilized the stamina system and enabled players to interrupt moves, as well as introducing momentum transfer to make it more of a competitive affair. You could also have up to 9 finishes if you liked, you know, just in case you wanted to literally kill your opponent and blame it on Buddy Murphy or whatever that nonsense was about. Lovely. Roster-wise, it came out in the midst of the Ruthless Aggression era, so expect the best and worst of that period. Yes, you can have Benoit versus Jericho versus Eddie, but you can also bear witness to epic Hell in a Cell encounters between Heidenreich and Snitsky if you've done something to anger God. Day of Reckoning 2 successfully bridged the gap between the THQ N64 games and the GameCube's next-gen offerings, but went a step beyond, creating a strong wrestling game that we're kind of sad never ended up on any other platforms, to be honest. Just grab a copy and you'll see what I mean.
Number 7. WWF WrestleFest. If you've seen Stranger Things, then you may be aware of a time called the 1980s, when the arcade reigned supreme, and battering your mates was a normal hobby. By the time the 90s rolled around, cabinet gaming was reaching its peak, with the release of some of the medium's best ever titles, just before the home console market all but wiped arcades out. In 1991, punters could team up with their mates and tackle WWF WrestleFest. It was loud, it was colourful, it was cartoony, it was WWF in a nutshell, I suppose. A far cry from the complex, in-depth grappling systems found in modern wrestling titles, WrestleFest was a very punch-kicky affair. But in 1991, we didn't know any better, so we didn't care. You could be Hogan, Warrior, Jake the Snake. You could team up with a friend as Demolition and try to take on the Legion of Doom. You could even battle it out in the classic blue cage. It was bloody great. Unfortunately though, with the decline of arcades and the eye-watering price of the original cabinets that occasionally come up for sale, your best bet to play WrestleFest is to get an emulated version or download the THQ remake for iOS, which, needless to say, isn't quite the same. If you do manage to track down an original cabinet version though, make sure you watch the opening message from the FBI warning about the dangers of drugs. Rad.
Number 6. WWF SmackDown, Just Bring It. Do you remember the first time you played SmackDown for the PS1? It was a revelation, not a gimmicky and daft WWF game like In Your House, and a vast improvement on acclaimed titles Warzone and Attitude. By the time SmackDown 3 Just Bring It rolled around for the PS2, the series was just starting to hit its stride. We now had full entrances, customizable movesets for the established roster, and a full commentary track from Michael Cole and Taz, although the less said about that, the better. Just Bring It started to move away from the arcadey feel of its predecessors and was intent on replicating the full wrestling experience on a home console, or as much as you can replicate the full wrestling experience while in the dark wearing nothing but your pants. You could even take the action backstage and all the way to Times Square for a big sweaty street fight if you fancied it. Releasing in 2002, it was firmly post-Attitude Era, but featured a meaty roster nonetheless, and finally had the full American badass Undertaker entrance with Limp Bizkit's Rollin' blaring out. Speaking of which, you could unlock the objectively sort of awful Fred Durst as an in-game character, and any game where you can pile drive the nookie-loving red cap wearing gimp through the Spanish announce table is always going to be an all-time classic. I see they've upgraded from the Meltorp to the Björster. Excellent choice.
Number 5. Fire Pro Wrestling returns. Fire Pro Wrestling is a weird one. You've either never heard of it, or you're so obsessed with it, you're prepared to kill small defenseless animals to defend its honor. The Fire Pro series has spanned 29 games, most of which were released only in Japan, but ported worldwide by eager gamers. The pick of the bunch is Fire Pro Wrestling Returns, released for the PS2 in Japan in 2005. If you're new to Fire Pro, you'll find that it's unlike any other wrestling game you've experienced. The action is viewed from an isometric angle, and it's all about strategy and tactics, rather than just nailing rapid fire finisher after rapid fire finisher. Also, it has a roster of 327 wrestlers. 327. That's just absurd. Chances are, if you can name a wrestler, then you'll find them here, although some of your favourites may need a costume and name change to be the finished article, like playing as Merseyside Red in Pro Evo. And even in the unlikely event that your favourite isn't one of the 327, there are 500 creator wrestler slots for you to play with. That's just silly. It's just silly. That's silly.
Number 4. WCW NWO Revenge. Wrestling fans of a certain age hold the AKI, or AKI if you want to get serious about this, N64 wrestling games with almost godlike reverence. Just ask them, hey, have you played the latest WWE game? And they'll jut in with almost cat-like reflexes saying,
but is it as good as the N64 games though?
See? It may be annoying, but they are right. Hands up, who's gone back and booted up WWE 2K14 recently? Yeah? Not many. How many of you have had a bash on WCW NWO Revenge though? Thought so. There's loads of you. The follow-up to WCW World Tour, Revenge was revolutionary when it came out in 1998. It blew its predecessor out of the water in almost every conceivable way, not just in terms of its roster, but also movesets, entrances, and customization. Whether a veteran of World Tour or a complete newbie, it was easy to just pick up a pad and play. It didn't matter if you played as WCW mainstays like Hollywood Hogan, Goldberg, or everyone's favorites like Hanzo Mon and Dake Ken. The game was a slick and fun affair anyway. Despite what came after, and more on that later, many fans still hold Revenge as the pinnacle of the series, probably because you can start any match as La Parka with a chair in hand and just batter your little brother until he cries. What a loser.
Number 3. Virtual Pro Wrestling 2. We could have put WWF WrestleMania 2000 here. Hell, we could have made this entire list out of AKI or AKI, if you want to get serious about this, N64 wrestling games, but sometimes you have to make sacrifices. Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 is, for all intents and purposes, WrestleMania 2000, but with the cream of the Japanese crop instead of the Attitude Era's finest. Even the opening video is the same, with Mitsuhara Misawa plodding along looking moody instead of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 has the edge over Mania 2000 for us because it managed to do so much more. For a start, there's that roster. The best of All Japan, New Japan, FMW, and Michinoku Pro, legends like Terry Funk and Vader, MMA stars like Baz Rutten, and crossover stars like absolute lunatic Minoru Suzuki. Talking of which, Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 has an MMA mode, allowing you to trade pins and top rope maneuvers for an in-depth striking and submission system. Ever wanted to see Giant Baba versus Atsushi Onita in a submission match? Of course you have! And Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 lets you make it a reality. Still don't believe how good this game is? Just ask Samoa Joe or AJ Styles themselves, both of whom claim it to be the greatest wrestling game of all time. AJ even collects copies of it like they're going out of fashion, so at this rate you might have to steal one of his to have a go at it. Rather you than me. If you're still not convinced, then just pretend we talked about WrestleMania 2000 instead. It's the same game. Sorted.
Number 2. WWE SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. The second WWE game following the inaugural brand split, Here Comes the Pain was the turning point for the SmackDown series. Building upon 4 games worth of fan-pleasing video game action, Here Comes the Pain was the moment a button masher became an immersive and competitive gaming experience. The grappling system was tweaked and built upon previous titles, but was still accessible enough for newbies, a fine balance between a casual grappling experience and intense and furious living room warfare. The roster featured all the big hitters of the era, including Brock Lesnar, Goldberg, and Doctor of Thugonomics John Cena, as well as legends like George the Animal Steele and Hillbilly Jim for some reason. It even marked the only WWE video game appearance of Sean O'Hare and his criminally underrated Devil's Advocate gimmick, so there you go, stat nerds. Here Comes the Pain was chock full of content. If you could imagine it, chances are you could do it, but not that. Gee, what's wrong with you? Want to powerbomb some idiot in the street, then elbow drop them from a passing helicopter? Of course you do, and you can do it here. After Here Comes the Pain, WWE games started to strip back the wackier elements and focus on the sport rather than the spectacle, with THQ rebuilding the series from the ground up. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, but some of us would rather play Mario Kart over Gran Turismo, if you catch my sick rubber-burning drift. This was the last pure SmackDown title before the SmackDown vs. Raw era, and although the new series was excellent in its own right, it just didn't feel as special as the SmackDown games. This is my favourite ever wrestling game, and that is all that matters. So there, blows raspberry. Oh.
And number 1, WWF No Mercy. Of course it is. Chances are you watched this video just to see if No Mercy was number 1, ready to type, you odious cretins, if we decided to swerve you. Rest easy, partner. It's okay. No Mercy is still the benchmark wrestling video game, almost 20 years after it came out. It built on everything that the N64 WCW titles, the Virtual Pro Wrestling series, and WrestleMania 2000 had perfected before it, creating the ultimate pick-up-and-play grappler. Released at the tail end of both the Attitude Era and the N64's lifespan, No Mercy was a game changer when it came out. It had an amazing roster, something which let down WrestleMania 2000, an expansive backstage area, ladder matches, tables, weapons that, didn't disappear. It was wrestling video game nirvana. And while the visuals of most N64 games haven't really held up today, part of the lingering appeal of No Mercy is that you can still tell who each wrestler is supposed to be, even if things might look blocky by today's standards. Your custom wrestlers blend in seamlessly next to the established roster too, rather than looking like a stick drawing next to the Mona Lisa, like with the modern WWE games, meaning that each copy felt personal to whoever owned it. As good as No Mercy is though, that story mode handicap match against the APA can piss off. Still gives us nightmares.
Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. You can follow us on Twitter at Cultaholic. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do here at Cultaholic, you can pledge to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Cultaholic. And most importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us.